I grew up living a pretty privileged life. Our family was quite well off. I was involved in sports, had a lot of friends, great family life. But in middle school, our family faced our first big tragedy. Our family lost all of our money and our home, and my mom and dad split, and me and my mom moved in with my aunt and uncle. At that time, I remember my mom and I were driving, and she was telling me, I was super upset about all the things that were going on, and she said that it's okay, Jen, like the material things, all the things in this world, like don't matter, they will go. What matters is that we have each other and we have God, and that's really important. And a few years later, and that really like kept me going. I was like, yes, like I have, like relationships matter, God matters, and my family matters. A few years later, my mom, my dad, and I, we all moved back in together in a condo together, and that's when the second big tragedy hit. We were all together, and it was just several months later, my mom started to feel really sick, and she went to the doctor and came back with the diagnosis that she had pancreatic cancer. At that time, they gave her 1 year to live, and she died within 7 months. And I remember thinking at that point, I was like, okay, like, I get it, like, the things in this world don't matter, right? Like, our possessions, or that we belong to a country club, or this and that, like, weren't that important. But family did matter, and now I lost that, and I realized that she had told me that you still had God, and so I'd say that was the first major seed that was planted in my life, was knowing that everything in this life can pass. People, things, everything passes, but God would always be there. And my lifestyle didn't really change at that point, but I knew that it was very important to love God and to have a relationship with God. I was 16 at the time, so as high school continued and college began, I fell more and more into just a sinful party lifestyle. And I remember in college at one point after my freshman year, and I remember just stopping and thinking and looking around and trying to find one person that was living for God, one person that was living a life with purpose and meaning. No one seemed to care about anything. Nothing was a big deal. It was just do whatever you want. If it's fun, then it's right. And that was kind of the lifestyle and the motto. And I started to think about like who inspired me. Like there has to be people that are inspiring. And I thought of my high school music minister, my friend Abby, and of course Mother Teresa. And those three people stuck out to me. And the one thing they all had in common was they weren't just falling in line. They weren't just doing what everyone else was doing. They were living a life with purpose, and they loved God with all of their heart. And that was so inspiring to me, and I got super amped up, and I was like, yes, like I'm gonna be like them, and I'm gonna live an awesome life, and I'm gonna change the world. And I signed up for a retreat, and I went to confession, and I started doing service. I remember I walked into a party one day, and everybody was drinking and doing different things, and I was like, I'm leaving here, and I went and I slept at a homeless shelter all night and serving the poor, and I was just amped up, like I was gonna do something good with my life. But the crazy thing is that it was like the seed that got planted on rocky soil. Like I had a lot of joy, I was really excited, but it had no roots, and I quickly began to fall. And that became the hardest part of my journey, because I knew what I wanted. I knew that there's something better to live for, but I wasn't, I just wasn't strong enough. I think the two biggest things that were holding me back was, one, I was so worried about offending people. I thought that if I really started to like live my faith and I really started to change my lifestyle, that people would either think I was too good for them, or that they were doing something wrong because I was living differently. And it just really weakened and watered my faith down. I also, at the same time, was having fun. I liked my life and I liked my friends. And I just wasn't ready to really change. So I continued to live like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, which is the worst way to be. I guess not the worst, but it's a bad way to be for several years, just fighting this battle of like wanting to be good, but then continuing to fall into sin. And it wasn't until several years later I became a missionary. And at this point I was like living a pretty good life compared to most people. Like people would be like, oh, Jen, yeah, she's involved in the church. She does a lot of good things. But it was still based on like trying to do good things. And I hadn't yet like fallen in love with God, which is the root of which all good comes. And I signed up for this 8-day retreat. It was required of us in our formation year. And on this retreat, my spiritual director told me to not, that I wasn't allowed to read any like spiritual readings or any encyclicals or anything like that, but just to focus on the scriptures. And so that's what I did, and I began. And to just put myself in the scripture. So like so often you read scripture and you apply it to your life and then you start being better in that area. I just lived the story. Like it truly like came to life. Like I like smelled Jesus. I could touch Jesus. I could hear what he was saying. I walked with him. And I really identified with Peter. And I started journeying through these scriptures as Peter. Like I physically dropped my nets. I was there at the Transfiguration. I cried when Lazarus died with Christ. I was there in the garden. And when Jesus died, I was so invested. I was so in love and so wanting to just follow anywhere he went. Wherever Jesus was going, I was right behind him. And when he died, I was crushed. And I feel like that was, it's not even a conversion because I'd had a conversion, but that was the greatest deepening in my faith because I had completely fallen in love and nothing, I didn't care about offending people or that I was having a good time with my life or whatever was holding me back. I just like loved God and I knew that I was sold out at that point. I just like loved him. But like so many love stories, like it, you know, you watch the whole movie and it's so great and then they get married, they fall in love and they get married and then it ends. Like the beauty was that was like the peak. Like that's when I like completely fell in love with God. But just like the apostles are then sent out into the Acts and Peter, who identified with it, sent out and starts performing Acts. Like that's when I was sent out and the fruit started to come from my love. It wasn't just that I was doing good, but I was doing good because I was in love with God. And I just two stories of the aftermath is one, my grandparents, they weren't practicing. They were Christian, but not practicing. And just by the mere fact that I was starting to live my life so radically, they got so confused that they were like, we have to learn more about what this Catholic church is or what's Jen doing with her life. So they started going to RCIA classes. And within the year, I was their sponsor into the Catholic church. And my grandma calls me up all the time just thanking me that she's finally come home. And she's so happy. And then the second biggest glory that has come from these fruits is my dad. So like I said before, like we had a lot of problems growing up. We really struggled. We weren't close. We didn't have a good relationship. But I invited him on a retreat and I asked him to pray the rosary with me. And on this prayer of the rosary, I realized that he really didn't know the Gospels. He really didn't know the story of God. He didn't know what any of the mysteries were. And so it was a perfect opportunity to be able to share with him this love story of Jesus that transformed my life, that like deepened my faith so much. I was able to share that with him. And luckily, he just turned around like that. He just swallowed up the scripture. He went home and read all three Gospels 3 times over in 1 month. I've never done that. And it was in God's perfect time because it was just several months later, he got sick and he ended up passing away within several months of having that conversion, just completely in love with God and on fire for God. And I'm just so joyful because I know that the journey continues and your faith goes on. And like, yes, I had like multiple little conversion stories, but the love story continues, and I know that my whole life is just going to be a continuation of a greater love for God, like a beautiful marriage that just continues to grow deeper. That's how I want to fall more in love with God, and I hope I have more and more conversions to just love God more, and that the good things I do aren't just because I want to do good and live this great life, but I just want to love God, and all good things come from that.